Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, Mrs. Ari. My name is Zahra Fildzananti Ramadhania, and today I would like to present to you about my reading report and movie report entitled Little Woman. Little Woman was written by Louisa May Alcott, and it was originally published in two volumes in 1868 and 1869, with the first volume following the March sister, Jo, Mary, Beth, and Amy, throughout their childhood growing up in Massachusetts, and the second volume picking up with the characters in adulthood. Whereas in the movie adaptation, it was led by Greta Gerwig as the writer and the director. Jo, Meg, Beth, and Amy March are four sisters living with their mother in New England. Their father is away serving as a chaplain in the Civil War, and the sisters struggle to support themselves and keep their household running despite the fact that the family recently lost its fortune. In the process, they became close friends with their wealthy neighbor, Theodore Lawrence, known as Laurie. On the Book of Little Woman begins on a Christmas Eve. The four March girls, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, sitting in their living room, lamenting their poverty. The girls decide that they will each buy themselves a present in order to brighten their Christmas. Soon, however, they change their minds and decide that instead of buying presents for themselves, they will buy a present for their mother, Marmee. So the story actually revolves around the four March sisters and their lives as they grow into adults. The girl must contend with learning to become good women and learning about who they are as people with the help of their mother and father. Next is point of view. Little Woman is written from a third person omniscient perspective. The narrator knows the girl's personality, thoughts, and feelings intimately. The third aspect is character. Josephine March, she's the main character of Little Woman. Jo is an outspoken tomboy with a passion for writing. Her character is based in a large part on Louisa May Alcott herself. She is a tomboy and reacts with impatience to the many limitations placed on women and girls. She hates romance in her real life and wants nothing more than to hold her family together. Next is Beth March and Meg March. Beth March, she is the third March daughter. Beth is very quiet and very virtuous, and she does nothing but try to please others. She adores music and plays the piano very well. Meg March, she is the oldest March sister. She is responsible and kind. Meg mothers her younger sisters. She has small weakness for luxury and leisures, but the greater part of her is gentle, loving, and morally vigorous. Then there are Laurie and Amy March. Laurie, she is the rich boy who lives next door with the Marches. Laurie, whose real name is Theodore Lawrence, becomes like a son and brother to the March. He is charming, clever, and has a good heart. Amy March. Amy is the March sister that most readers love to hate. She's the youngest of the family and she fits the stereotype of the spoiled youngest child. Next, we move to the last aspect, which is differences and modification. The first differences and modification that I notice is about the story plot. The most drastic difference is that instead of a linear narrative, Gerwig focuses on the young adulthood of Marge's sister, with the childhood scenes coming in the form of occasional flashback. She preferred to use the 21st century new direction in script writing, which is the nonlinear storytelling. To begin, Gerwig version starts with the second half of The Little Woman. The March sisters have grown up and found their way and place in world, where other version treat the sister peripherally, largely leading them to their marriage and then dropping them as if their life is over. Gerwig version finds parallel moments in their life, which makes them feel like real people who grow into and exist in adulthood. There are flashbacks such as Christmas scene, but not like what you imagine. because instead of extended stretches of linear narrative, the film flits between four March sisters at different times in their lives, giving us fragments of story moments out of time. Some of the transition are achieved with such a little fuss that you can barely tell the scenes are set years apart. There are other there are also other transitions are linked by emotional through lines, like Joe saying Amy has always had a talent for getting out of hard parts of life. And is followed by her younger sister big scene from earlier in the book where she burns Joe's writing in angers. As Miss Ari can see on your screen, um, there are scene where Joe March sell a scandal story uh, to Mr. Dashwood, which is the publisher of the weekly Volcano in New York City office. But whereas on the book, Joe was still a teenager, and the first setting was supposed to be in March family residence in Massachusetts, but it shows modification because they used the flashback sequence. The second difference that I notice is about the different ending. So in the book, Jo March spends much of the pages talking about how she never wants to marry or have a children. But at the end of the story in the movie, Jo eventually marries with her boarding housemate Professor Bear instead of her childhood friends Laurie. So the story is built. Sorry. So the story builds into like the familiar conclusion in which Frederick Bear, her friends from New York, visit the March house and offer Joe one last shot at romance. In both the novels and the adaptation, the romance is seen through its happy conclusion. But here, scenes of Joe running after Bear and her happily ever after are cut with scenes of Joe meeting with her publisher in New York to negotiate a deal to publish a novel she has just finished based on her life with her sister. Ultimately, Jo gets a sweet deal for her book and gets to maintain her rights to the story in exchange for a happy ending in which her protagonist is married off. And thus, the character of Jo further blurs into Louisa May Alcott herself, and then the new movie integrates the notion that Jo had to be married off in the first place. The third difference that I noticed is more overt feminism. So interesting to point is that just like in the 1933 version, Gerwig version set marriage as a threatening presence even though it's also a necessity. Marriage has its practical purposes as an economical agreement. In Gerwig version, Amy gives a monologue how, as a woman, she is unable to earn her own income, therefore must rely on her husband to sustain her. Um, this is where Gerwig introduced another major difference and new aspect in the adaptation of the book. By giving Amy logic context, Gerwig indicates that individual choices are a consequence of systemic cause and effect. Amy must act in the world she was given until a structural change can take place and over her freedom. This version of Full Woman remind us feminine is in all of us, just in different shades and ways. In today's world, there is place for all types of woman power, and we shall not diminish it. The last differences that I noticed is the way Marmee being represented. In Greek version, Marmee brings up a topic that has been a taboo for so long, which is woman anger. Except for the TV miniseries with Emily Watson, The Sentence, which appears in the book, all other versions never gave it a place. Marmee confides with Joe by saying, I'm angry nearly every day of my life. We finally get to hear Marmee's frustration of the confinements and limitation that were put on women at the time. We get to see the real feelings of that woman who was left to raise four girls on her own without support from her husband or society. And I think that'll be all from me, ma'am. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.